Is blindness a barrier? No.
Is deafness a barrier? No.
Are mobility, learning, cognitive disabilities, speech impairments and others, or even a combination of them, barriers? No way. Lack of accessibility is.
Welcome to Web Accessibility for All.
Follow the blind. This journey starts now.
Every day, I run into code that builds walls. It replaces visual truth with invisible lies and ends up silencing the interface exactly when I need it most. If you are navigating by voice or sound, like I do, misplaced ARIA-LABEL is a dead end. Today, we'll expose how helpful code accidentally cripples the experience for voice users. Let's look at the myths and the reality of ARIA-LABEL. Ariel here, and welcome back to Web Accessibility for All.
Why excessive ARIA hurts web accessibility?
Ever felt that itch to add an ARIA-LABEL to every element just to be safe? We often treat ARIA as a safety net, when it's actually a high-wire act. When you add redundant attributes, you aren't providing clarity, you are creating ARIA soup. Take a look at this classic example of over-engineering.
Less button. ARIA-LABEL equals close. Title equals close greater. Close. Less / button greater.
The screen reader experience.
Close, button, close. Tooltip, close.
It seems to be the close button, right? Well, you've just told an screen reader user the same thing 3 different ways. Let's continue the journey and see more ARIA-LABEL incorrect use cases.
Why native HTML semantics are unbeatable?
Using native labels for larger hit areas.
When we opt for ARIA-LABEL simply because it feels cleaner or stays invisible, we're often accidentally creating barriers for users who don't even use a screen reader. I'm talking about the hit area. Think about a tiny checkbox on a mobile screen. If you use a native label element properly paired with an ID, that label isn't just text, it's a target. You can click the text and the box checks itself. Otherwise, you've just shrunk your interactive target to a square. And what about the motor impairments experience? The user tries to click the text. Nothing happens. They have to precisely hit that square.
Less input. Type equals checkbox. ID equals terms check greater. Blank. Less label. For equals terms check greater. I agree to the terms and conditions. Less / label greater.
I agree to the terms and conditions, checkbox, unchecked.
Again, the user clicks a long sentence, and boom, the checkbox toggles.
Browser logic. How the accessibility tree works.
The accessible name computation.
Ever wondered how a browser actually decides what to call a button? It isn't just magic. It's a cold, calculated process called the accessible name and description computation. The browser is looking for the truth, and it follows a very specific order.
ARIA labeled by.
When a valid reference exists, the browser stops looking.
ARIA-LABEL.
is used when no higher priority naming source is available.
Native, the text inside the tags.
It only gets a turn if no ARIA is in the way. ARIA misused is not cheap. It actually can destroy native semantic that might be already there. Once ARIA-LABEL is used, the browser does not fall back to visible text. It takes a snapshot of the text you provide and throws everything else in the trash. Listen, this computation is the backbone of how assistive technology interfaces with the DOM. If you don't understand the hierarchy, you are just guessing.
How to use the accessibility tree for testing.
How do you know if your ARIA-LABEL is actually working? Yeah, while testing with a screen reader is essential, there's a better way to see exactly what's happening under the hood: the accessibility tree. It is a filtered version of the DOM that the browser hands over to assistive technologies. If an attribute doesn't make it into this tree, it doesn't exist. Most modern browsers now let you inspect this tree directly in the DevTools. It can show you
Name,
for instance, close button,
role,
whatever role it can be.
computed properties,
It will show you exactly why it chose, for example, close. If the name is wrong, then check naming source. If empty, then check role or prohibited naming. If duplicated, then check ARIA labeled by chains.
Common ARIA traps.
Understanding naming prohibited elements in ARIA.
Have you ever meticulously labeled a div or a span only to find that a screen reader acts like it isn't there? You're not alone. This is one of the most common gadgets: naming prohibited elements. In the ARIA specification, there's a concept of generic elements. These are the bricks and mortar of our layout. Things like div, span, p, and li. By default, these elements are not allowed to have an accessible name by ARIA-LABEL. Look at this code example.
Less div. ARIA-LABEL equals important information greater. This is just some text. Less /div greater.
This is just some text.
Yep, screen reader completely ignores the important information level. The browser sees a div and then discards your label entirely.
Why ARIA-LABEL is not a substitute for image alt text.
Here is a technical nuance that trips up even seasoned developers. We are taught from day one that every image needs an alt attribute. Naturally, developers think,
if alt equals empty string hides an image, ARIA-LABEL equals empty string will hide a button, right?
wrong. In the world of ARIA, an empty label is not a hiding command. The screen reader still sees the element, but it has no idea who they are. As Leonie Watson famously explained,
ARIA doesn't change the nature of an element, it just changes how it's described to the accessibility tree.
Global and universal access.
Why ARIA attributes fail in multi-language interfaces.
many translation services are designed to translate text nodes. They often completely ignore attributes like ARIA-LABEL. Anyone using assistive technology could jump to your app, turn on the translator, and the page shows a translated text. But the ARIA-LABEL, the actual accessible name, stays just like it was written in the code.
less button, ARIA-LABEL NV equals close window greater, less slash button greater, blank, less spam, ID equals close window, hidden greater, Server Ventana, less slash span greater.
Since ARIA-LABEL by points to one or more text nodes that are actually in the DOM, the screen reader now announces the visible text.
Why buttons don't click for voice control users?
Imagine you are navigating a website using only your voice. You see a button on the screen that clearly says,
"Contact us."
You say, naturally,
Click. Contact us.
and nothing happens. You say that again, louder this time. Still nothing.
What's happening now?
When you use ARIA-LABEL, you are creating a programmatic name that is hidden from sight. Some voice recognition software are looking for the programmatic name, but the user is looking at the visual text. If they don't match, or the visible text is not contained inside the ARIA-LABEL text, the bridge is out.
Less button, ARIA-LABEL equals send us a message about your order greater, contact us, less slash button greater.
Here, this single code can trouble users in different ways. Visual user sees contact us. Voice user says click contact us. The machine fails because it's looking for a button named send us a message. The screen reader experience.
Send us a message about your order button.
Wait, why did the screen reader user have to listen to a whole sentence just to know it's a contact button?
You've increased the cognitive load for the blind user and completely broken the site for the voice user.
Accessible information architecture.
Stop using labels for instructions and hints.
One of the most frequent mistakes I see in accessibility audits is the instructional overload. It's when a developer uses an ARIA-LABEL not to name an element, but to give the user a manual on how to use it. Imagine a password field. A developer wants to be helpful, so they code
Less label, for equals pwd greater, password, less slash label greater, blank, less input, type equals password, ID equals pwd, ARIA-LABEL equals must be at least 8 characters with one number greater.
Must be at least 8 characters with one number, edit, protected.
Wait, what happened to the word password?
We need to use the right tool for the job. If you have extra information, don't shove it into the label. Use ARIA described by, or the newer ARIA description.
Less label, for equals pwd greater, password, less slash label greater, blank, less input, type equals password, ID equals pwd, ARIA described b equals pwd hint greater, blank, less p, ID equals pwd hint greater, must be at least 8 characters with one number, less slash p greater.
Password, edit, protected. Must be at least 8 characters with one number.
Why writing less ARIA often leads to better compliance.
Accessibility is the quality of the craft itself. Our goal as developers shouldn't be to build a special experience for blind users. It should be to build one universal experience that works for everyone. So, go, try to see how much ARIA you can delete while still keeping the experience crystal clear. That's the mark of a true developer. Thank you for joining me for this deep dive into ARIA-LABEL. Now, go forth and code responsibly, semantically, and minimally. See you next one. Goodbye.
Thanks for joining us today. Subscribe for a new challenge next week. And don't be shy. Leave us a review or ask your accessibility questions online. See you next week for another episode of Web Accessibility for All.